Jim, let me know when you're good to go.
I just hit record. We're good to go.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Councilmember Doreen Garland, and along with Councilmember Joel Navarro and our Mayor Corey Woods, we would like to welcome you to the Human Services and Community Safety Committee meeting. Due to concerns over the coronavirus, the city has implemented measures to protect our community, including the closing of council chambers and limiting public attendance to electronic means only. Members of the public may attend the meeting virtually through Cisco WebEx events or view the meeting recording by visiting www.tempe.gov/clerk for more information. And it's important to understand that no formal votes or decisions about city programs, policies, or budgets will happen here. Our role is to explore various topics with staff and stakeholders and community members and to make recommendations to our council colleagues. We want this process to be transparent, inclusive, and easy for you to be a part of whenever you choose to be. And you can share your thoughts with us by filing a comment card. You can file a comment card on any item that's on the agenda by reaching out to us directly with any other thoughts or questions or ideas. We need you to fill out a comment card in advance that can be read into the record for any agendized item. The link to the comment cards can be found on our committee webpage at www.tempe.gov/HSCS, and you will also find contact information for committee members and staff there for non-agendized questions as well. Again, I'm Councilmember Doreen Garland, and I would like to call this meeting to order on the 22nd of October, 2021. It's the meeting of the Human Services and Community Safety Council Committee. Our mayor is here today to help us with quorum for this meeting, but since he is a non-voting member, we will move the approval of our meeting minutes to the end of our meeting when Councilmember Navarro is in attendance. So we will skip from item 1 to item 3, and we will go to public comments. The committee welcomes again public comment, and according to the Arizona Open Meeting Law, the committee may only discuss matters listed on the agenda. Matters brought up by the public under public appearances that are not listed on the agenda cannot be discussed by the committee. A 3-minute limit per person will be in effect. So Tim, do we have any comment cards?
Yes, Councilmember, we have 4 comment cards. I will give them in order.
Thank you.
The first one is from Anna Egetz Gomez. Anna, I'm going to make you a panelist right now, and then you should be able to speak for up to 3 minutes. Okay, you should be able to go.
Go ahead, Anna.
Oh, okay. Now I am muted. So my name is Anna Egetz Gomez. I am a Phoenix resident. I have children in the Tempe High School school district. I like to comment about vaping. As a scientist, I like to share a few words on the neurobiology of addiction. And adolescence is a period where major physical changes happen in the brain, and they are not extremely vulnerable to addiction, but also even small changes produced by substance use will stay with them for the rest of their adult lives. They are very susceptible to addiction to other drugs like alcohol and gaming after nicotine exposure. As a parent, I like to find a way to express the horrible
I've lost
pain.
audio. Is it just me, or have we lost her audio?
Oh.
Yeah, I can hear her.
The horrible pain of seeing your child's life potential vanish as the child starts vaping nicotine, and then it follows with the use of alcohol and other psychoactive drugs. So many parents send their 12 to 14 children to school. They are talented with a lot of interest, and then they get back an addict that can barely manage to finish high school. And that's an obscene loss of talent and productivity and also life, because yes, this substance use will kill them. Vapes are widely available and illegally distributed to children right now, today, inside bathrooms, schools, in gas stations, and in many other sites. And this is just to allow the companies and individuals who produce and sell these substances to ensure they have these young customers hooked for life. And then even if they want to, they will be, most of them, unable to quit. So why are we allowing this to happen? Thank you very much.
Okay, Anna, thank you so much for your comments, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
All right, the
Tim,
next
the next
comment
person you
card.
have?
Yeah. The next comment card was from Brian Hummel. He said if he wasn't here, he would like it read into the record. He said, I will be at Tempe Beach Park setting up for the American Cancer Society's annual Making Strides Against Breast Cancer walk tomorrow, so I might not be able to attend. If I'm unable to join via WebEx, I wanted to make sure that you are aware that the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network is supportive of the prohibition against selling flavored tobacco and strong regulations on tobacco retailers. Okay. Our third one is from Joanna Struther. Joanna is here in attendance. Joanna, I'm going to make you a panelist and then you can address the council. Okay.
There we go. Good afternoon, Council and Mayor Woods. My name is Joanna Struther, and I am with the American Lung Association in Arizona. And you'll be hearing a presentation later today about restricting flavored tobacco products, but also just wanted it to be entered into the record. The American Lung Association does support removing flavored tobacco products from the market. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joanna.
Thank you, Joanna. All right, the final comment card is from Claudia Rodas. Claudia, I am going to make you a panelist and then you can address the council. Okay, you should be able to. Claudia, you can unmute and address the council. Claudia, one more time. You can unmute and, oh, I think she just got moved back.
Hello,
Oh, hi.
can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, for some reason I was not able to press that little button on unmute, so I apologize. Let me start over. I'm not sure if you heard me. I was talking away. My name is Claudia Rodas. I am the Director of Southern Region for the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids. I'm here today to lend our organization's support to today's discussion around flavored tobacco products. We support ending the sale of flavored tobacco products because the rise around youth e-cigarette usage has grown to epidemic levels, according to the U.S. Surgeon General and the Center for Disease Control. I won't go too much into details because I know some of that will hopefully be covered in today's presentation, but I do want to point out a couple of things that may or may not be mentioned, particularly around the tobacco industry long history of targeting communities of color, youth, LGBT community, and other underserved populations. We are thankful that that today y'all will be listening to this discussion, taking this issue on as and hopefully as a priority. And we are here to lend our support through research, our advocates, and in any other way that we can in trying to assist the city of Tempe in ending the sale of flavored tobacco products. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that was the final comment card.
All right. Thank you so much, Tim, and thank you for the people who signed up and read and were a part of this meeting with their comment cards. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is committee session items, the current items and updates. However, we'd like to elevate items 4B, the new items for consideration, to go first because we have external partners that are presenting and we'd like to be courteous to their time. So first, we will have a presentation on the ordinance for flavored tobacco products. So I would like to introduce Bernadette Coggins, the Program Director for the Tempe Coalition, American Heart Association Government Relations Regional Lead, Nicole Olmstead, and Community Bridges Public Information Officer, Stephanie Slate. So you guys go ahead and make your presentation. Thank you so much for being here.
And Nicole, you're going to be giving the presentation, right?
Stephanie will be giving part of it, and then she'll toss it to me.
Yes.
Okay. Do you want me to run the PowerPoint?
Yes, you guys could start the slides. That would be great.
Okay, I will run. Just tell me when to go.
Go ahead. And I'll just say next when it's time for switching slides and what have you. So we'll try to keep it brief, but first and foremost, I just want to thank you guys, thank the council members and everyone on the call for hearing this important issue. There's so many organizations that are collaborating because I think the bigger picture is we're just trying to protect children. So thank you for Tempe for allowing this brief talk. You can see from the title slide here, what we're really doing is just trying to talk about flavored tobacco products. Go ahead with the next slide, and I'll go over some quick facts before I pass this to Nicole. And in terms of introductions, I guess we should kind of validate who we are. For myself, I am the Public Information Officer with Community Bridges. I partner with various organizations, pay parents against vaping and e-cigarettes, tobacco-free kids, and Nicole will introduce herself. I work with the city of Tempe, the Tempe Coalition with Bernadette. This is just a very near and dear issue, close to so many people's hearts, and that's my part, but I'll let Nicole, when I toss it to her, tell a little bit more about her background and one of those other important organizations. So go ahead with the next slide. Okay, I'm not going to get stuck on reading the data. I really just want you guys to hear it, understand it, feel the concern that currently there are over 15,000 flavors of tobacco products out there geared at our kids. When I say flavored, we're talking about sweet flavors like candies and ice creams, cookies and Oreos. All of this stuff is completely geared towards our children. 15,000 flavors. Cigars. Actually, just kind of pause. It's like when we were all growing up, you knew the one stinky flavor of a cigarette and the one stinky flavor of a cigar. Well, now there's over 250 cigar flavors that are out there. Menthol, please note, is considered a flavor. And although we've seen decline in cigarette use, menthol products have increased in use by 37%. So go ahead. I think this is just interesting as opposed to reading all of them because we're so brief here. The quotes really go back to the 70s. Big tobacco has just evolved, but they're basically talking about how they know that they were targeting teenagers. Quote, it's a well-known fact that teenagers like sweet products. Honey might be considered. Make a cigarette, which is obviously youth-oriented. They could involve cigarette name, brand, flavor, marketing technique. For example, a flavor which would be candy-like would give the satisfaction of a cigarette. So this isn't new news. This isn't new tactics. This is old tactics. Full circle to 2021, going after our kids. Go ahead. Just kind of showing you some of the popularity here. So again, you see the data, 81, 72. Let me be specific and clarify on this. 81% of our youth who've ever tried a tobacco product have tried it because it's flavored. So think about that. 8 out of 10 times you ask a kid, why'd you do it? Well, because it tasted good. This is one of the biggest reasons we want to remove these flavored products. And then currently in the last month, 7 out of 10, over 72% of our youth are using it because it tastes good. It's flavored. Next slide. It's on the rise. What's really interesting personally is my first job was, tobacco education, remove the cigarettes. We were successful. We had a major decline in cigarette use among our kids. But as you guys look at the graphics here, over the years, we've had significant increase in prevalence with our kids in middle school and high school using e-cigarettes. In this next slide, you can kind of see the frequency, right? Go ahead to the next slide with the blue bars. And I knew that was coming. That it's frequent, it's used. These are our everyday users. These are children. I'm going to explain to you guys why they're getting so addicted so fast. But as you can see, it's really been on the rise and it's very common. Go ahead with the next slide. Okay, this looks like such a basic slide, but think about this. Back in the day, when someone was done with one cigarette, right? That's when they were done. One cigarette. Today, now you're done with a pod. And one pod is equivalent to a pack of cigarettes nicotine. I'm going to say that again. One pod is 20 cigarettes. If you didn't know this, Juul, like the biggest, there's a newer one, which we'll talk about in a second, but Juul's well known. It got a lot of attention. It's $1 billion industry. Their starter kit came with 4 pods. So you do the math, you came with 80 cigarettes. You have more frequency, more potency with our kids. We can't smoke. No one can smoke a cigarette in a school. Back in the day or now, they'd get in trouble. But they are using these pods. They're using these disposables in the schools. So there, again, that's what I meant with frequency and more nicotine. Go ahead. Just to give you some examples here, the Trump administration in January of 2020 made an attempt to remove some of the flavored tobacco products, but keep in mind the flavors that they removed were cartridges. And what's popular and cheap and available to our kids are the disposables for as little as $3. So although Juul might have been the popular, it was just replaced with a prettier, newer version, which I'll show you here in a moment. So if you go to the next slide, kind of just gives you some of those ideas and visuals. But keep in mind, almost 54% of youth e-cigarette users are using those disposables. That's what we need to target. That's another just example. If we had more time, I could go over all the different products that are out there. But disposable sales in a little over a year increased by 250%. So removing cartridges didn't really help. Go ahead with the next slide. I'm not going to ask anyone to squint as I'm doing that, trying to read this slide. Let's do the summary. Menthol use is on the rise. Menthol e-cigarettes and youth use. You can look at that dark green bar at the bottom there. That basically shows you it's been on the rise over the years. In 2021, 30% of our high school e-cigarette users reported using menthol. So it's just as much a concern. Next slide. Again, some of the popular brands, it's not just the Juuls that are out there. The Soren, a lot of these ones end up looking like highlighters, the USB drives. Go ahead. Just want to make sure I have enough time for Nicole, so I'll just show you some of the facts. Okay, really quickly on this one, it's still new. For this to only really appear in 2015 and to quickly be more valuable than Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest, you know, they were invested in by Altria, the parent company being Philip Morris, put $13 billion into these guys. So this is the popular product that was replaced by Puff Bar. If you go to the next slide, I think one of these shows the Puff Bars in here. And we get to it, I'll show you that they're just like colorful Juuls. They are the disposables that our kids are using, putting in their sleeves when they're using in schools, exhaling into their shirts, exhaling into their backpacks. This is probably one of the most important slides because it kind of just shows you the progression, right? Step 1 was like, we got to lure these kids. And then in step 1 and 2, we're going to lure and market. We're going to get them addicted to this stuff. Like I said, 1 pod, 20 cigarettes. We lure, we market these kids with savvy, beautiful, pretty, dance, hip ads. And a lot of these ads are the same kind of ads that were used in the 70s and 80s, just more current. And again, I already said it, but I'm going to say it again because it's so important. In step 4, Altria invested $13 billion to support, if you call it, what I call it, the evolution of cigarettes, the new e-cigs that went towards our kids. And in step 5, that's why we're here today. That's why we're working together to try to get the support from Tempe to do whatever we can to remove and ban these flavored cigarettes from being in the hands of our youth. And I think the next slide is my last slide. I'm trying to remember all my memory. Go ahead and skip this slide. It's really just talking about the prevalence of the Juuls. This is the last slide I was talking about. I think it's, you know, for my part, to give you the education, tell you what it is, but also this is probably a super important slide, just summary. This stuff's burning our kids' lungs. This is burning anybody's lungs. We have those little cilia in our lungs that protect, you know, keep out particles and debris. We need them. And then all of a sudden we burn them away from smoking or vaping anything. We're more susceptible to getting illnesses and sick. It, again, impairs our breathing. If we didn't learn in this last few years about COVID and things like that, it's important to breathe. And then my last thing too is just kind of bigger than breathing, not bigger than breathing. It's important. These things blow up. This stuff could blow up in your hand. You could blow out your teeth, rip apart your hand. Those little particles are plastic and glass, could shoot in your eyes. You could lose your vision. And then when we think of ripple effect, just imagine if this is mango and strawberry and peach flavored stuff, and that little pod is in a backpack sitting on the floor, and along comes the family pet, or a 2-year-old little toddler who goes, oh, well, that smells good, and puts it in their mouth. This is going to be toxic and poisonous to so many other people. And the last thing, it's so important, I'll say it again, nicotine addiction. These kids are being exposed to high levels of flavored nicotine earlier in life and using it more frequently. That's why we really hope in this next part that I'll pass to Nicole, that you guys will support this ordinance. We can talk to you about all the other efforts. Ultimately, no matter where you live, we're trying to protect and save our kids. So with that said, I'm going to give it to Nicole.
Thanks, Stephanie. Stephanie has clearly outlined the problem, and I'm going to talk through what we can do about it. Before we get started, I'm Nicole Olmstead, the Government Relations Director for the American Heart Association, and I, along with my colleagues at the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, American Cancer Society, Cancer Action Network, and the American Lung Association, have long been working to protect Arizonans from the dangers of nicotine, a deadly addictive product. We have partnered with the Tempe Coalition, whose mission, as you know, is to reduce youth risk behavior and promote health and wellness through awareness education, advocacy, and connecting to community resources. Tobacco use most definitely constitutes a risky behavior, and we appreciate that Tempe has long been a leader in this policy area, and we thank you for that. So, what to do about flavored tobacco products? Next slide. There are 3 primary ways that we can address flavored tobacco products. The 2009 Tobacco Control Act only gave FDA regulatory authority over cigarettes, smokeless tobacco, and roll your own tobacco. 7 years later, the 2016 deeming rule extended this regulatory authority to all tobacco products, including e-cigarettes and cigars. Congress has the power to prohibit the use of flavored tobacco products through federal legislation. And finally, states and municipalities can pass legislation that prohibits the sale of all flavored tobacco products. Next slide. Currently, there are 5 states, you can see this list on the slide, and over 300 cities nationwide that have passed legislation or ordinances eliminating the sale of flavored tobacco. In Arizona, in addition to this conversation, we have been working with Phoenix on a similar effort. We have been in discussion with several leaders and organizations across the state who have indicated interest in bringing similar ordinances to their communities. Those discussions are progressing, and we are looking forward to more ordinances advancing soon in other Arizona cities and towns. Tempe would be a leader in this statewide movement, like they always have been in protecting their residents from this deadly product. Eliminating the sale of flavored tobacco products is important because, as Stephanie mentioned earlier, over 80% of kids who have used tobacco started with a flavored product. 83% of current youth e-cigarette users have used a flavored e-cigarette in the past month. And 70% of your current youth e-cigarette users say they use it because it comes in flavors I like. I know this from personal experience because my daughter's favorite flavor was apple, and I work in this area all the time. She knows the dangers of these products. Essentially, as long as there are flavored tobacco products on the market, kids will be attracted to them and will become addicted to nicotine. Next slide. We are here to urge the city of Tempe to consider adopting an ordinance that would end the sale of flavored tobacco products and establish a tobacco retail license within the city of Tempe. I'll walk through both of these components briefly. An ordinance that ends the sale of flavored tobacco products would impact all tobacco products and all flavors, including mint and menthol, which are the most popular flavors for kids. This includes cigarettes, e-cigarettes, or vapes, cigars, little cigars, and any other product that is derived from tobacco or nicotine and intended for human consumption by any method. For example, chewing or inhaling, sticking under your tongue for absorption. Additionally, it would strengthen and update the definition of tobacco that currently exists in Tempe City Code. Next slide. The second part of the ordinance, and equally important, is that it would establish a tobacco retail license. Currently, Arizona is one of 12 states that does not have a tobacco retail license, so it is nearly impossible to know where all of the tobacco products are being sold. The Arizona Department of Health Services and the AG's office have a list that they work from, but in order to get that list, they occasionally have resorted to simply driving down a street and looking at shops to see where they think tobacco might be sold. Some interesting places that they have found tobacco products are things like barbershops, restaurants, nail salons, and even donut shops. Kids love to be in donut shops. It is important for enforcement of any ordinance like this to be able to identify where tobacco is being or is sold in order to ensure compliance. There are currently 2 cities in Arizona, Flagstaff and Tucson, that have a tobacco retail license in city code. Flagstaff is still in the process of finalizing their license, and Tucson has had a license in place for 20 years. They strengthened it in 2019. Next slide. A violation of any federal, state, or local law would result in a series of graduated penalties for the retailers. I'd like to point out that these penalties would only apply to the retailers that break the law. If a retailer does not sell to someone who's underage, or if they do not sell flavored tobacco when this ordinance passes, then they would receive no penalties. The information on this slide is an example of the graduation. For a first violation, the penalty could be a monetary fine, or it could be a re-education class, or some combination of the two. If that retailer was to fail another compliance check within a 30, penalties would get stiffer. They wouldn't, and then they would start to include things like sell tobacco products. That's what the real motivation is for retailers to comply with the various laws and ordinances. The threat of losing the ability to sell tobacco, it's a fairly lucrative industry for retailers, and so losing that ability is the carrot, if you will. After the 4th violation within a 36-month period, we would recommend that retailer's license be revoked, as they are clearly not following the laws and ordinances as they should be. It's important to note that the violation is location specific. So if one retailer owns multiple shops, the violations are not tied to their whole franchise, but just that one location. Next slide. So who would enforce the license? And the various laws that go along with it. Each municipality has the opportunity to decide where best to house their license and compliance efforts. In Arizona, both the Attorney General's Office and the Department of Health have a program that conducts unannounced compliance checks, and the City of Tempe could coordinate with them on compliance efforts as well. We believe that the police do not play a role in the enforcement of a tobacco retail license, because we don't think that possession of a tobacco product does not constitute a cause for city law enforcement to initiate contact with an individual, regardless of that person's age. So we don't think that the police have a role to play in the enforcement of a tobacco retail license. There's a number of city administrative departments that can take on the role of compliance. Next slide. What the ordinance does not do, it does not prohibit adults over the age of 21 from buying regular flavored tobacco products. So products that are flavored as tobacco. It simply eliminates the fruity and minty flavors that attract and hook kids to a lifetime addiction to nicotine. Next slide. So what we ask in terms of next steps, what our preferred, what we would hope would happen is that you would support the development of an ordinance that eliminates the sale of flavored tobacco products and establishes a tobacco retail license within the City of Tempe. We believe that there should be education for the retailers in order to comply with that, and then recommend an ordinance effective date of 90 days after adoption, so that education can happen. Thank you, and I am happy to stand for questions, and thank you for letting us present. And there's our contact information.
Great, thank you, Stephanie, and thank you, Nicole. I do have a question. So you guys are saying kids, what age are the kids that you're talking about?
In terms of the youth that go in and do the compliance checks, or are you talking about the kids that are typically purchasing tobacco products?
That are purchasing the products.
We are seeing tobacco products being purchased all the way, or we are seeing kids being able to obtain them in one way or the other, all the way down to middle school, and even in elementary school. In a lot of cases, they may be getting them from, in that situation, you may be getting them from an older sibling. But there is a lot of the ability to purchase them through Snapchat. And I think Stephanie may be able to answer a few more of those questions.
And you were on the right path there when you were talking about older brother, sister, friend. You will hear all the time that a lot of the older kids sell to the younger kids. It's a way for income, but we've got reports down as early as age 10 because again, this stuff is more appealing and it looks safe, it smells good. So again, this isn't just teens, this is pre-adolescence, which is concerning.
Yeah, that's really crazy. I was actually at a convenience store on Wednesday morning, and a young man was in front of me, and he said to the cash register person who was working there, and he said, "But other places let me buy it." And she said, "Well, I can't. It's against the law, and I won't do it." And he walked out. So I have to say, I was so impressed with her. I told her, "Thank you so much for following through and doing and not selling it to." Obviously, he was underage.
That's awesome.
So as a council committee, we cannot write an ordinance, but what I'd like to be able to do is to be able to ask our staff to work on developing a policy on flavored tobacco products to bring to the full council at a future work study session for their consideration on this. So I would like to be able to move that forward and at least do that and see what that looks like in the future for us. So, but the information that you gave was incredible. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Fantastic. And we really appreciate that. We would be happy and thrilled to work with the staff. We have a number of resources for the staff because we've worked on these ordinances in other cities and kind of know how it would work best.
Okay, well, great. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time and sharing this information. It's kind of frightening, but it's necessary for us to learn this. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so we will move on to item 2B, and it is a presentation by our Tempe Police Department and ASU De-Escalation Research Project. So I would like to welcome Assistant Chief Mike Pooley, ASU Professor Dr. Michael White, and Commander Dane Sorensen, and SPARC Supervisor Carlina Orozco. So you guys, please go ahead with your presentation. Thank you for being here.
Carlina, I'm going to make you presenter now.
Wonderful, thank you.
There you go.
Perfect, thank you so much. Where's the sound? Okay,
Great, we see it.
okay, perfect.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mike White. I'm a professor at Arizona State University, and I just wanted to take a moment to thank the committee for allowing us to speak today about some work we've been doing over the last several years, a partnership between ASU and the Tempe Police Department. And Assistant Chief Mike Pooley is here, but you're mostly going to hear from me, from Commander Sorensen, and from Carlina. So I think Carlina is going to advance the slides for me. So if you move to the next slide. We do want to acknowledge the fact that the work that we've been doing, the presentation that we're making today are consistent with the performance measures for the city and this committee in particular. Just a little bit of background on this project before I turn it over to my co-presenters. So it was probably late 2016. I had just finished up working with TPD on an evaluation of their body cam project. And I sat down with the leadership at the time and we talked about what we could do next to continue our working relationship. And, you know, if you think back to 2016, the death of Michael Brown in Ferguson was still fresh in everyone's minds. The President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing had just released their report. There was a lot of focus on de-escalation. There was this sense that every police officer in the United States should receive de-escalation training. So this got the leadership and I talking, and as we looked into this, we realized that there was no real consensus on what that meant, on what de-escalation is, what it isn't, does it work? So we devised a project that would explore those questions. And the project that we're going to talk about, it was funded by the U.S. Department of Justice. So it was a grant that was given to the city and the police department. And it was essentially, you know, a 3-year project that was very straightforward. And as you see from this slide, the project was to design, deliver, and evaluate a customized de-escalation training program. And when I say customized, what I mean is that there are dozens of actual de-escalation trainings that are out there that could be used. And the Tempe leadership at the time decided almost immediately that they didn't want to take one of those off-the-shelf trainings. Rather, they wanted to build one that was ideally suited for their officers, for their department, for their community, their residents. And before I turn it over to Carlina, what's going to happen over the next several minutes is we're going to talk about the three things you see on this slide. Carlina is going to talk about the design. The department went through about an 18-month process to actually develop this curriculum. And she'll talk a bit about how that was done. Commander Sorensen is going to talk about the actual curriculum itself and how it was delivered to officers. And that will include, I think, a video that is part of the training. And then I'll bring up the final part, talking a bit about the evaluation that we've done, looking to see whether or not the training had an impact on officer attitudes and behavior. So I think with that, I'll kick it over to Carlina, and she can talk a little bit about the design phase.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mike. So in order to, truly design a very comprehensive curriculum that would cover all the topics we were interested in, we wanted to gather as much information as possible. And so we took this 18-month period to truly identify all of the techniques, strategies, and materials that we could incorporate into this training. So the first thing we did was send a lot of our officers to de-escalation trainings. These were not only online, some were also in other states and other agencies. There were also several that had nothing to do with policing and had to do with education or other fields as well. We also had some officers go to other agencies who are doing something with de-escalation, whether it's developing their own training or perhaps incorporating it into other facets of their policies and procedures. And after that, everyone came back with some information in terms of what the training entailed, how de-escalation was defined, and some other thoughts about, the delivery of the training and opportunities for improvement, perhaps. In addition, we surveyed all of our officers in field operations, and that means our officers who are in the field and patrol activities and those types of roles. We surveyed them about de-escalation tactics, specifically the different techniques and strategies that they use in order to de-escalate in the field. We also asked their perceptions about tactics that are perhaps less effective when attempting to de-escalate as well. So we gathered all that information over 3 different administrations of the survey. And then finally, we conducted a peer nomination process with our officers in field operations. And what we did is we asked officers to nominate 3 of their colleagues that they felt were exceptional at de-escalation. And so after they did this, we had a list of a number of officers who were nominated at least once. That was then given to the supervisors in field operations to provide their top de-escalator list. We did this in order to ensure that the officers who were highly skilled were identified versus based on popularity. From that, we identified a list of 14 top de-escalators, and then we spent quite a bit of time with them. So we went on ride-alongs where we were actually responding to calls and observing their interactions. We also conducted focus groups with these officers to discuss de-escalation, specifically looking at some body-worn camera footage from other agencies that involved a volatile incident and what they would have done differently. And then finally, we conducted some interviews with our top de-escalators to get their expertise and understand their training and their trajectory in terms of becoming very skilled at de-escalation. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Commander Sorensen, who's going to discuss the delivery of the curriculum.
Thank you, Carlina. All right. The initial, when we put 22 officers out in the world to look at different trainings, when they came back, we realized that there were 4 things that we really wanted to touch on in any training that we came up with for Tempe PD and the delivery of that. So the first was the pre-care. And when I speak about pre-care, what we're talking about is how are officers coming into the job? How's their personal life affecting the job? And what is the supervisor's responsibility in seeing differences in their officers, potentially things that are happening outside of work? The second quadrant you see there is the self-management. An officer needs to know their own limits. How are they showing up to work? What kind of self-assessment are they doing of themselves? And what kind of management, what do we control in a day? Briefings, for example, are one. Are we using briefings to prepare ourselves, to prepare our mind, to prepare our mindset for the job that we're going to be going out to that 10-hour shift? The third quadrant is managing resources. Our officers understanding what tactics, resources, communications, what are the things that are out there that can assist you on every single call? And the same thing goes for supervisors. How can a supervisor set the tone, energy, and direction of a call? And then the last is the resiliency piece. Are we learning from every call that we go on? Are we doing a post-incident debrief to make us better for the next call? Because there is the next call that you're going to right now. Are we taking the time for ourselves after a call to make sure that we are resetting? And what kind of peer check-in are we doing? Peer support, the mental health side of that for the resiliency. All right, next slide, please. Believe it or not, one of the hardest things we did was actually coming up with a working definition of de-escalation. And that definition, when you break it down, is basically finding ways to, including officer safety, reducing violence or aggression, both from the suspect and from the officers in our law enforcement contacts. And as I spoke with those quadrants before, what it really comes down to when we started teaching, we realized we had 3 pillars that we wanted to deliver to our people. First pillar is self-care. Are we taking care of ourselves? What do we need to do both individually as a supervisor and as an agency to make sure that our officers are showing up in a good space so that they can make decisions that are sound when they go on that first stressful call and the last stressful call of every shift. The second piece was emotional intelligence, and this was actually taught by a set of ASU professors. And what we were looking for is, are you reading, are our officers reading a call they go to correctly? Are you arriving on scene and understanding based on emotional intelligence, body language, what is actually occurring in front of you so you can make proper decisions when you're doing an enforcement action? And then the last and probably the most important part, at least from a day-to-day call perspective, is the operational piece. That's the operational pillar. And we talked about going to different places and picking up different training. Probably the most impactful training is day 2 of a 3-day training that LAPD put every single officer through. And this is where we got the patrol model. This is an acronym, and it's a decision-making framework that we apply to every single call for service. And I'm going to kind of walk you through the acronym right now, and then we're going to jump into a video and I'm going to apply it to that. So the P in patrol is for planning. Every single call, every day you show up, what's the plan? You hear the call come in on the radio. There should be some sort of plan that's formulated by the officer responding first, the second officer, the supervisor listening to the call. They all have different roles to play, but they all have to have their own plans that fit in together. The A is for assessment. Rarely do we get a call for service that is exactly as it was called into our dispatch and communication people. When you arrive on scene is what you're seeing in front of you, what you were sent to. T for time, and we call time is distance and cover, and it's distance and cover between a potentially dangerous suspect and the officer, but it's also distance and cover between a potentially dangerous suspect and the general public. We have an obligation and a duty to act if people are in danger surrounding whatever the incident that we're responding to. And then the R is for redeploy. What we try and do is empower our people to make decisions as they are seeing things unfold in front of them, that they can make plans to move themselves, move other officers, or move the public, or try and contain a suspect. Redeploy to put yourself in the best situation to have an outcome that works the best. The O is for other resources. Tempe PD has a lot of other resources, a lot of specialty units. We have a lot of technology, a lot of less lethal devices. Are we getting all the tools to the scene and all the people there to help you to help bring this situation down? And then the last is lines of communication. Lines of communication, when we teach this, we realize that what we try and get to our people is there's 3 different groups of entities that you will be communicating with during any call for service. One is police officers, anybody on our radio, fire department. The second is the general public. they want to know what's going on. And if we're clear in communicating to them what is happening, it allows for better outcomes. And then finally, the suspect. There's clear direction given to a suspect or person we're contacting with the hope of them understanding that there's potential consequences for not following the instructions. And those could be less lethal devices. For example, if we had an armed robbery suspect and we approached them and they weren't complying and we had a less lethal device, we would say, hey, you're going to get shot with this taser. It's going to hurt. If you don't comply, you will get hurt. And typically that helps us take people into custody. So we'll go to the next slide, please, Carlina. When we did our first test run, we picked very experienced officers from across the agency, and our initial curriculum was 20 hours. It was rough. I will give you that. We tried to get everything to our people in a very in-depth way. After receiving the feedback from both the participants and from the ASU instructional designers that watched, we were able to manipulate the 2-day training down to a 10-hour 1-day training. And we did those 1-day trainings to half of field operations between February and March of 2020. We used trainers from our training unit, the top de-escalators that Carlina had mentioned before that had been voted on, and by the outside experts, the ASU professors. And then after the training was delivered, the control group, our experimental group got monthly follow-up videos to push the patrol model, make sure it's at the front of their thoughts. So this video you're going to see is not part of the original training, but it was part of the second half that we delivered. And I'm going to let this video play out. I'm going to give a little bit of a warning here. So I'm going to give context to it. This is a call for service. This is actually a police station here. This is where I'm sitting right now. In the lobby, we have a female who is high on an unknown substance. She breaks the window to get into the police department lobby. She does have a knife. She has cut herself and she is threatening people with a knife. Ultimately, she is not harmed by us. You're going to see how we take her into custody. I'm going to let the video play and just let it play. And then we're going to go back one more time and I'm going to speak about how we're applying the patrol model and how we use this as a teaching tool for our people. Go ahead, Carlina. There should be sound here when the officer touches their body cam. This is the 30-second buffer that we get of silence. Sound?
Taser. Okay, who's got lethal? I was just holding a knife right now. Yeah, I'm just gonna pop her. Get down, drop the knife. Drop the knife. Drop the knife. Wait, thanks for the point. Hey, don't move. You're gonna get it again. Do not move. Get down on your stomach. Lay down on your stomach. Hands out to your sides. Do not move.
All right, I just want to verify. Could you guys hear the sound on that? Give me a thumbs up if you could. All right. So I'm going to speak over the video. Can you turn the video down here for me just a little bit? I'm going to speak over the video as we're going to give you an idea of how we use the patrol model. So
My apologies.
call for service comes in. These officers are DUI officers that are writing their paperwork for the night. They're making a plan. You can't hear them talking, but you will hear them talking shortly. He's getting his gloves on. He's knowing he's going to have to contact somebody. First officer communicates, hey, she's up there. She's looking away from us. You'll hear the officer talk.
Taser.
He's gonna be a taser. He's gonna ask for a lethal coverage
Yeah, lethal.
in case this person comes and attacks him. When we talk about assessment, hey, this is our opportunity right now. She's not facing us, and we really, time is on our side, not to extend this and let her see and then maybe barricade herself somewhere. They make a nice plan.
Get down, drop the knife. Drop the knife.
Ultimately not communicating correctly with her before the taser goes off.
Hey, don't move. You're gonna get hit.
And then
Do not
now
move.
time changes.
Get down on your stomach.
You're
Lay down on
redeploying.
your stomach.
These
Hands out to your
officers are
sides.
saying, hey, there's no reason to jump on this girl, tackle her, or anything else. The knife is fallen. You couldn't see it, but one of the officers
Yeah,
kicks
we're
it.
good. Hey, she's got blood, so quick
Communicating
look.
to dispatch, which is starting the fire department right now. And they're gonna slow down. They're not gonna put themselves at risk or her at risk. She had gloves on because she has blood on her. And they're gonna slowly walk through, taking her into custody and getting her medical aid. She's not hurt by us. This could have had a far more severe outcome. This is something that we'd really like to see out of the patrol model. Does that make sense on that portion? Hopefully it does. All right. Your turn.
All right, back to me. I just want to talk a little bit about the work that we've been doing to evaluate the training. And Carlina, next slide. We used a very rigorous research design to evaluate this training. It's a randomized controlled trial. And what that means is that there were specific squads that were randomly selected to receive the training and other squads that were randomly selected to not get it. And the evaluation then centers on a comparison of the outcomes of those two groups, the group that got the training versus the group that didn't. And we collected a ton of information trying to answer that basic question. What I want to do here is just highlight a couple of different outcomes and data sources that we've used that have shown, I think, very powerfully that this training has had a positive effect. So let's start, Carlina, next slide. We'll start talking about some body cam footage. So we treated body worn camera footage as data, if you will. Both before and after the training, what we did every week is we randomly selected 10 officers, 5 from the group that received the training and 5 that didn't. And then we went into the storage system that holds all the footage. And for each of those officers, we then randomly selected a video they had uploaded within the last 7 days. So each week, 10 officers. Each week, we watch a video randomly selected from each of those officers. And then we had a data collection instrument that captured just a ton of information about all of those encounters. Aspects of the call, what the officer said and did, what the citizen said and did. And obviously what we're doing, like I said, is we're comparing how encounters are handled by officers who got the training versus those who didn't. And as you can see on this slide, we were able to identify in a very, very nuanced way 5 important differences, all favoring a positive impact on the training. So for example, trained officers were significantly less likely to use a condescending or patronizing tone. They were significantly more likely to try to build rapport with the citizen. And you can see the other findings here, but it was really important that the body worn camera footage allowed us to look at the encounters, as I said, in a very nuanced way and to identify differences between the groups. Next slide, Carlina. So that was just a kind of a random review of body cam footage. We also looked at body cam footage of all use of force encounters. All encounters involving use of force 6 months before the training was rolled out and 6 months after the training was delivered. And we have all that information I just referred to on the previous slide. But what I want to highlight here is one finding in particular that I think is really important, and it involves citizen injuries. Now, keep in mind, these are all encounters where an officer used force, much like in that video that you just saw. And what we've been able to document is that in use of force encounters, citizen injuries are much less likely to occur if the encounter involved an officer that received the training. Just 11.2% of the citizens were injured. that is more than half the rate compared to encounters involving use of force with officers who did not receive the training. Very powerful finding. Next slide. The other finding I wanted to highlight comes from citizens. And so after the training was delivered, we spent months talking to Tempe citizens on the phone. We were calling citizens who had a recent encounter with a Tempe police officer, both those who had encounters with trained officers versus those who did not receive the training. And we asked citizens about the encounter. We collected a wide range of information. And what we were doing is we were looking for differences from the citizen's perspective about the encounter, if it involved a trained officer versus one that did not receive the training. And as you can see from this slide, we identified more than a dozen different significant differences, all again favoring a positive training impact. So what you see here is basically we're asking citizens indicate your level of agreement with the following statements, and higher scores are more positive. So citizens' response to the question, the officer treated them fairly. You see a higher score there. The higher score is among citizens who had encounters with trained officers. So the findings here involve some, I think, pretty important aspects of police-citizen encounters: fair treatment, being honest, the officer listening, the citizen being satisfied with how they were treated, patience, compromise, showing empathy. So all very, I think, important and powerful findings, again demonstrating that this training had a significant impact on how officers were handling encounters with citizens in the city of Tempe. Next slide. So I'm going to kick it back to Commander Sorensen and Carlina. They're going to talk a little bit now about next steps.
All right. So one of the kind of a preface to this, when we did the LA training, I sat down with their chief psychologist for all of LAPD, and she made an important point. She said most trainings, I think it's probably across all different professions, but especially police work, you go to a training and you walk out the door and you don't remember it ever again. And she talked about how they had to go into all their policies, all their procedures, and add the key de-escalation wording, policy, just add it into every part of the agency. So when we came back, we started doing that. Through a couple of different things. Through policy, we force review committee. What you see there on the right on this slide, we review per policy, and it's on our public-facing documents for the PD policies, a range of force every month that is reportable through our reporting chain through IA Pro and Blue Team. We now have a form that talks specifically about de-escalation and patrol, where officers using the things that we taught. Was a supervisor on scene? Was a supervisor doing the things that they needed to do to de-escalate? And if we don't have a good example of an officer doing that or a supervisor doing that, third Thursday of every month, the training unit has it set aside, and we bring in officers for additional training that is tailored to whatever need that we observed in the piece of force that we viewed. Also, part of the policy stuff, it went into our use of force policy. We talked specifically about de-escalation, the patrol model. And some of those changes were also spurred on by the citizen review panel that now goes through the same patrol training once a year when we get them up to speed for anything that they're going to be observing. Doing this has made this a part of the culture and DNA of the department. Every training that you go to, so our officers have 2 10-hour advanced officer trainings a year. They get training and scenario-based training on de-escalation, the patrol model, self-care, peer support. We're not letting this slip away. We're coming back twice a year doing it. Same thing with supervisor AOT, which is an additional 10 hours for supervisors. They get the same thing. And every promotional process and every individual training, even if it's a firearms on the range, we talk about de-escalation, the patrol model, putting ourselves in a position to have success. And the last piece of this is Carlina is currently working on a second study for de-escalation training for our dispatchers. And this is the final piece essentially to permeate this de-escalation patrol model throughout every level of the agency and through every different bureau that we have. Any questions?
Thank you so much for the presentation. And Councilmember Navarro is on this call now, and I was just going to turn over to him, see if he had any questions.
No, but first I just want to say, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. No, this presentation is outstanding. I mean, it's just the type of training that you guys are providing for our officers and how you're going about the training. You guys are probably spot on. You know, you go to a training and often you go and do the training, but then what did you learn? And, you know, how do you retain this stuff? You know, what you guys seem to be doing is just utilizing this training in every aspect. I love the idea of videoing. It's almost like watching your game film, and then you're like, okay, what could you have done better? You know, how could you improve that situation? Those little aspects of the training, I think it's outstanding. So just want to say thank you so much for the presentation. It was great. Thank you.
Yeah, and I have to agree with Councilmember Navarro. I thought the information that you gave was really good. I'd like to see that we are doing de-escalation training. That's really exciting. And I was curious how many of our officers, I mean, it's not just the beat officers. So we're also talking about commanders. And I like that you're talking about 911. I did sit with the 911 department a month or so ago, and that was really interesting. But it's nice that you were doing this training in other areas. I'm just curious how many of our officers have been trained. What's your goal to get them completely trained?
Every one of our officers has been trained now that this study is in the evaluation phase or the final phases. And then, for example, when we onboard new employees through pre-academy and post-academy, they get the same curriculum and the constant influx of patrol model videos, training videos from our people, and then just follow up. So everyone's gone through it, and we just continue to reinforce.
Okay, great. And Dr. Waite, thank you so much for your presentation and for the questions that you had and the information that you received back. That's really going to help to make a difference to making our police department a really good police department that our citizens respect. And the de-escalation, I think, is a really important part of it. So thank you very much for all of you, for all your help.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we will go ahead and close this section, and we will then move on to the next part of our meeting today. We're going to go on to presentations on the Hometown for All initiative. So I would like to welcome Deputy Human Services Director Levon Lamy.
Sorry, I think I need to elevate him.
All righty.
I don't see Levon. Hey, Naomi, are you running the slide? Okay. Hey, Paul, I'm making you presenter. Okay, Paul, we see it.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Levon Lamy. I'm Deputy Human Services Director for Housing Services specifically. And today we'll do a little bit of a recap over the Hometown for All initiative, specifically touching on some restrictions and covenants for the ongoing preservation and maintenance of affordable housing properties. As it relates to the city's overall strategic priorities, this very specifically ties into 4.09, the housing inventory ratio, which is the goal is to maintain the housing blend from our last housing inventory. This also meets the committee focus area of C1 for this committee. Now, Hometown for All, overall, the intent was to accelerate housing affordability to create the next generation of affordable and workforce housing opportunities in the city of Tempe. It has 5 overall components. We're acquiring improved and unimproved properties for affordable and workforce housing. This could either be houses, condos, apartment complexes, or vacant land that would be assembled into a future development. The funding for this program comes from a combination of sources. The city council has committed the equivalent of 50% of the building permit fees on an annual basis, so that there is a dedicated funding stream moving forward, and has also presented, there is a suggested formula for voluntary donations in order for developers and pretty much anyone who would be interested in supporting affordable housing to donate. So far with this project or this initiative, which was approved in January of 2021, we have over $6 million in cash donations and pledges received up till this point. So it's actually doing quite well and generating the money to do affordable and workforce housing. Now, for this, part of what we have done and the way this initiative was structured and the overall is to do the acquisition to create permanently affordable homes, apartments, condominiums, single family dwellings, even some small apartment complexes. Looking at land acquisitions, acquiring the land to hold the land in perpetuity, to then partner with developers to create the affordable or workforce housing. There's also a redevelopment component. So looking at some city-owned properties, there are vacant residential parcels that the city has that we're looking at for the redevelopment of home ownership opportunities, and then any other properties that may make sense. With the incentivization, with this dedicated funding stream, there is a part of the money that is earmarked to go for a competitive process for developers to apply for that would incentivize or help buy down the cost of market projects to then be able to include more of a workforce component into that project. So with that, what we're really looking for and kind of the most benefit is that either long-term benefit or a permanency of these affordability restrictions. So with all of the land acquisitions, one of the huge pluses with that is using that the funds to acquire the land or the houses or apartments, whatever it would be, that through the agreement and the contractual relationship between the Tempe Coalition for Affordable Housing, Inc., which is the affiliate nonprofit of the city, and the city contract, deed restrictions are placed on that property at the time of acquisition that limit the maximum income level of the folks who can live in the unit. So it's going to be permanently capped out at 120% of the area median income by contract. Any land that is acquired or any of these units, that title is not going to be released. If we buy vacant property, those covenants are impressed upon that vacant property. When we work with developers to develop that property, our covenants are in the first position. So we enter into a long-term lease with them. I'll just say 60-year lease. The developers do not have the ability to lien the property. They only have the ability to lien the leasehold improvements. We also have the contractual relationship with those developers that outline exactly what the income ranges are that would be able to live within those units. And there is annual monitoring to ensure that these covenants are being maintained. And if there's not, there are clawback provisions and there are financial penalties. It's even when we're doing the incentivization of other properties, there is annual monitoring. These are not grants. These are long-term loans with provisions. So for the sake of argument, if Human Services is building an apartment complex. There's a $30,000 loan to help buy down the cost of the units, and it's a 30-year affordability period. That would be a non-payment loan for the $30,000 with clawback provisions. If they did not comply with the income limits, then it would trigger repayment provisions to bring that money back in, so that we would, it has that incentivization to make sure you're complying with the contract, but if you don't, we get the money back to then be able to work with other folks on building new units. So again, City Council, through the redevelopment or the incentivization, Council has stipulated what the ranges are. Hometown for All is capped out at the workforce range, which tops at 120% of the area median income. Deed restrictions are impressed, and part of the covenant agreement between the city and the affiliate is that the properties cannot be sold without a rather lengthy process to do that. And we intentionally made it very difficult to sell these properties so that there was that permanency with this and with those covenants. Again, with the incentivization, it is a loan, not a grant. So if they don't comply with their monitoring or contractual requirements, we have the ability to recapture those funds. The next part of this, and we were asked to provide some information on Hometown for All as it relates to the sale of city properties. Currently, there is a requirement that any funds from city properties default to the general fund unless it is specifically authorized by council to be distributed to another fund, account, or use. That is the existing policy. If there was any desire or direction to change that overall policy or the Hometown for All and its components, we would need to, council direction would be needed to develop a proposed policy, which would then need to be presented at a work study or an e-session moving forward to change either of those agreements. And that is the high level on the clawbacks and the covenants. So if anyone has any questions or needed any additional information.
I don't have any questions, but I really appreciate your presentation. This is really important for us to figure this out, but it would be great. I mean, I can turn it over to Councilman Navarro if he has a question. If not, I think it would be to our benefit if we were able to come up with some kind of policy to address the sale of city-owned land for the Hometown for All initiative, and if that could be put together and presented for the council consideration at a work study session or an e-session. I would like to see that moved forward, but I'll go ahead and turn that over to Councilman Navarro if he has any questions. Don't see any questions.
All right, we can certainly start working towards developing that proposed policy for the disposition of city-owned properties and what that would look like for presentation and consideration to council.
All right, I appreciate that, Levon. Thank you so much. And I don't see that Councilmember Navarro has any questions. So we'll just go ahead and move on to, oh, there he is.
Oh, no, I was sorry. No. Levon, you guys just do an outstanding job. And I just so appreciate you guys. Keep on pushing this thing, man. So keep on moving. So thank you guys.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, so we'll move on to our next presentation on the social determinants of health and mental roadmap. We would like to welcome the Human Services Director, Naomi Farrell, and Deputy Human Services Director, Paul Bentley.
Thank you, Council members Navarro and Garland. I am joined by Paul Bentley, Deputy Human Services Director, Sean Wagner, Deputy Community Services Director, and Kenneth Steele, a member of Pinnacle Prevention and one of our lead facilitators in this work. We will share more of this partnership in a few moments. But this afternoon, we will provide an update on the progress the Social Determinants of Health Task Force has made since our last presentation in March. So this slide shows the purpose of the presentation that we will go through this afternoon. But as we present, please keep in mind that we must also acknowledge that the universe of factors included in the social determinants of health are larger than what Tempe can affect alone. Partnerships and creative approaches will be necessary to affect change across all determinants. In brief, what we are discussing is a very systematic and comprehensive approach to creating and utilizing a new performance measure on health and wellness as part of the City Council's strategic priorities and strategic management system. The performance measure will be based on the social determinants of health. Currently, there are 2 performance measure placeholders, one initiated by the Human Services Department and the other by the Community Services Department. These are performance measures 3.37 and 3.34. Both departments have recognized the value of replacing these placeholders by creating a single performance measure that is more holistic in its ability to measure the overall health and wellness of our community. Very simply put, the social determinants of health are the economic and social conditions that influence differences in health status. This includes the health promoting factors found in one's living and working conditions, such as the distribution of income, wealth, influence, and power, some of which are shaped by public policies. The World Health Organization helped facilitate understanding of the social determinants of health in the early 2000s. In 2008, the WHO published a report which aimed to understand from a social justice perspective how health inequity could be remedied and what actions could combat factors that exacerbated injustices. They determined the unequal distribution of health damaging experiences is not in any sense a natural phenomenon, but is the result of a toxic combination of poor social policies, unfair economic arrangements. The United States Centers for Disease Control look to apply social determinants of health to the American population. They define social determinants of health as life-enhancing resources such as food supply, housing, economic and social relationships, transportation, education, and healthcare, whose distribution across populations effectively determines length and quality of life. These include access to care and resources such as food, insurance coverage, income, housing, and transportation. Simply stated, a nation's wealth is a strong indicator of the health of its population, but within a nation, it's an individual's socio-economic position that is the powerful predictor of health. Understanding this, Human Services and Community Services have worked to identify social determinant of health measurables for Tempe. In other words, the social determinant of health is a way to evaluate the resilience of our community and plan for how to improve areas of imbalance. We can build a resilient community across the board. Utilizing the social determinants of health to inform the new health and wellness performance measure will better inform decision-making for our community. Some examples include informed policy, develop deals and requirements, advancing current programs and services, develop of new programs and services, business attraction, equitable distribution of amenities for city investment, and improved strategic partnerships. I'll now turn the presentation over to Paul Bentley.
This slide represents a significant accomplishment for the task force. When we last met, the Social Determinants of Health Task Force, representative of Tempe Human Services, Community Services, Strategic Management and Diversity, the Tempe Community Council, and the faith-based community, was researching and selecting a social determinants of health framework. We shared that there were several frameworks available to choose from, and the task force was reviewing available options to select a framework that best suited the needs of Tempe. I'm happy to share, for purposeful review and critique, the Vitals Foundation's Elements of a Healthy Community framework was selected. This framework was deemed more comprehensive than others and is better suited to incorporate and engage a greater knowledge of stakeholders than others. Specifically, this framework is more inclusive of other areas beyond human services, including community services, as well as other departments, as well as our partners within the community, whether they be nonprofits or faith-based. Examples include social justice. As social justice changes, the elements of a healthy community can change. I'm hearing that my voice is not carrying very well. So in that, our intention here is to utilize this framework, which includes social justice, social cultural cohesion, quality affordable food, and others as our social determinants, so that we can ensure that we're incorporating not only other city departments, but also our partners as we work together to impact the health of our community. One example to help. Looking specifically at quality affordable food as one social determinant, this category seems fairly straightforward and could be interpreted to mean that neighborhoods across our city should have equal access to grocery stores, which will result in access to healthy options. What is not as obvious is that communities of color may not be able to afford the healthy options and will therefore rely on food boxes that are historically carbohydrate filled with limited fresh produce and lean protein options. As a result, the result is a higher incidence of obesity and diabetes within this specific community. After selecting the Vitalist framework, the task force is now challenged with identifying specific indicators that are measurable for each of the social determinants, such as access to care. Again, the intention is to utilize this tool to help promote positive decision-making. An example can include the number of primary care providers available per square mile in the city of Tempe, or the measurement of adult and/or youth mental health for the community. Again, with the intention of tailoring the framework to Tempe, the task force's next step is to identify those specific measures per social determinant of health. And so this group came up with some ground rules to help ensure we created a framework that was usable for the city and our partners. So ideally, we were looking specifically to data sets and indicators in which the data is free and accessible, that it's available at the city level at the least, that it's easily accessible, that we have the ability to disaggregate the data by race, ethnicity, age, gender, income, zip code, etc. And the importance of this is that we might have a measure that says, wow, the city is doing really well. But when you disaggregate the data, you may find a specific population is not. Therefore, we can make specific adjustments to help assist that specific population that might be underserved. We need to make sure that the data is available on an annual basis and that it's aligned with the strategic plans of the city. And so I can't emphasize this next piece enough, graciously, and that's why you see the specific icons on this slide. Arizona Healthy Communities, the Vitalist Foundation, and Pinnacle Prevention have volunteered to assist the city of Tempe in completing this work. Specifically, Serena Unrein, John Ford, Cynthia Melde, and our guest Kenneth Steele are those representatives from each of those organizations. To date, the task force has identified draft indicators for each of the social determinants that you saw listed, everyone around the circle. During the last task force meeting, participants reviewed 3 of the determinants specifically, and following very healthy debate, voted on selected indicators for these determinants. And so we're going to share that work to provide further explanation and clarity as to how we're moving forward. This slide, as you will see, is looking specifically at the Parks and Recreation social determinant. The team, the task force, identified on the left-hand side 4 specific indicators that met the criteria that we just went through, and they felt were those that deemed best able to help inform us as to our influence on parks and recreation and the influence of the health and wellness of our community. It was a participatory process. So the percentages that you see is the result of our votes, meaning of all the members of the task force who are experts in their fields. 33% voted that physical inactivity was a specific indicator that we should use to measure parks and recreation, whereas 13% voted that quality ratings of parks should be that indicator. And so again, this is intended to show not only what the indicators were that were the finalists, but also the participatory process to help deem what indicators would be chosen. As a result, the group selected physical inactivity, access to parks and recreation, and level of service as those indicators that best represent our city as a whole, influence on park and recreation, and its influence on the health and wellness of our community. And if need be, Kenneth is with us to help go into greater detail, but based on time, I'm going to keep speaking, but our data expert is with us. Looking now specifically at the second of the third, is that the group focused on access to care. Again, the finalists were looking at levels of uninsured in our community, the overall youth mental health of our community, primary care physicians, annual checkups, access to care in primary language, and or adult mental health. And from those finalists, the task force decided, based on its expertise, that measuring the uninsured within our community, again, from a disaggregated level, youth mental health and overall adult mental health would be the finalist indicators for us to understand and measure access to care. This is not to say there aren't other measures. This is not to say that there isn't other data. This is to say these are the measures we feel are most prominent with data that meets our criteria and accessible for us to measure, that we can point to specifically on a consistent basis for change. Third and finally for this conversation, educational opportunity was reviewed. Finalists were preschool access, third grade reading, high school graduation, and degree attainment. Again, from the voting that came across, the indicators that were chosen were preschool access, third grade reading levels, and high school graduation. And again, we'll speak about this example in a moment. It's believed that those indicators are the most readily available for us to measure how educational opportunity is moving within our city as a whole and influencing the health and wellness of our community. It's a system. So as an example, this graphic represents an example of how this will work, using educational opportunity as that example. So based on the research, we know, again, from this group of experts, that preschool access, third grade reading levels, and high school graduation is a strong indicator of educational opportunity. And we know that educational opportunity in itself influences the health and wellness of our community as a whole. So what we're saying here is as preschool access increases, third grade reading level increases, high school graduations rate increase, that the educational opportunities will increase as well and make a positive impact on the overall health and wellness of our community. This is one example of all of the determinants of health that we're walking through to do the same work. So this data will drive and inform decision-making, as Naomi stated prior, on future policy, development, programs and services offered in our community. It will have an even greater impact as we analyze this data at the demographic, income, and geographic level of review. Our next steps are this. Again, we're going to finalize the selection of those limited but powerful indicators for each of the social determinants of health. We're going to create a system to ensure that we are gathering and analyzing the data on a consistent basis based on all the criteria that we just spoke about. And we're going to finalize the new health and wellness performance measure that is more inclusive of not only departments within the city, but also our partners within the community. Present the findings either here or at a work study session in the future, and then implement the Tempe Social Determinant of Health Framework to help drive decision-making in the future. We are available for any questions that you may have.
Well, I'm just stuck at wow. Holy smokes, that was an incredible presentation. I absolutely love what you guys are pulling together and the team that you pulled together to make this presentation, but really to step up the health and wellness of our community by what you're doing. I have one question on how are we going to relay all of this information about what we're doing and how it's going to work and how we're going to use it to make policy and make changes in the city moving forward. But how are we going to let our residents know what we have done? Because this is so incredible.
I think what we can do, we obviously do want to get this out to the community. So as we talk about what community meetings look like, is it a town hall meeting? Is it smaller community meetings? I think that's up for discussion, but we definitely need to get the information out there and what we're trying to accomplish. Then as we work more on this too, it'll be important to bring community members into those conversations too, to get their feedback on the process.
That's amazing. Joel, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just going to parlay on that. I mean, Naomi, you're spot on. I think whatever we can do, coffee talks, park meetings, neighborhood meetings, all that information to get it out. This is tremendous information, and it's got to get broadcast. I mean, it's kind of what paints the city as that all-inclusive city, the city that's thinking of all the little details of healthy communities. And I think that's a huge thing that we need more. It's almost it's part of our marketing, you know.
Right, and we do have Susie Steckner that's part of the team, that she attends the meeting as well from Community Relations, so.
That's incredible. What a great team you guys have. Thank you so much. And so there will be a presentation, a final presentation on this at a work study session in 2022?
Yes, that would be our plan.
Okay, I am really excited. I cannot wait for that final presentation. Thank you so much for all the hard work that you put into this. This is just, it's just absolutely amazing. Thank you for the work.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
Councilmember Garland, just one more thing. The partnership of those on the task force, whether it's, again, community services coming to the table right at the very beginning, and all the other partners, internal and external, it's amazing work being done by this group. And just thank you for the comments, both council members.
Yeah, you guys are wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, so we are going then to move on to item B, 3B, which is new items for consideration. So just want to let you know that our next Human Services and Community Safety Council meeting is not going to be until January 28th. The presentations at that meeting will be a Human Services Department update, a presentation on Vision Zero update, and a presentation on the interdepartmental solution to park and downtown safety. So those are the things you guys can look forward to. I'm looking forward to those. So the next thing, we have item number 5, but just before we go back to item number 5, Tim and Joel, can we go back to item number 2 and approve the minutes from our last meeting?
Yep.
All right. So I know that Councilmember Navarro has looked at the minutes. If we don't have any changes, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes.
Approve. So
All
moved.
right. All right. And it carries. That was so simple. Thank you. So then item number 5 is the next meeting date. Again, we just said is Thursday, January 28th at noon. And we have no other items on our agenda, so I'd like to call for an adjournment of this meeting. Are you good with that, Joel?
Yeah, oh yeah. We'll see
All
you.
right. We are
See you in a
adjourned.
second. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.